welcome. Welcome. Our apologies for being just a tad bit late, making sure everything is working technology wise. And welcome to our Facebook Live community. So I'm Lisa Johnson and president of the Bossier Chamber of Commerce. And so today is our chamber chat that we've been doing on a pretty regular basis as we've been living in this hybrid world now. And today our chamber chat is with the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, and we have invited Ed Mortimer with the U.S. Chamber to come and talk about the infrastructure bill. We know that infrastructure bill at the federal level has been getting a lot of conversation and a lot of talk, and we just wanted to make sure that we brought some of the experts from the Washington, D.C. area down here to the Northwest Louisiana area and to bring you up to date on that. So before I introduce Ed, I would like to say thank you to our sponsor for today's Chamber Chat, Barksdale Federal Credit Union, and we always appreciate what they do for us in the community and support us in all areas. So thank you to Barksdale Federal Credit Union for bringing this program today. So with that, I am going to introduce Ed. And Ed and I mean, I've been here at the Chamber 17 years. And you've been at the U.S. Chamber for some time as well. So he and I, we talk often. We meet face to face when I go up to D.C. And let me just introduce him to all of you that are on the call and on Facebook Live. He serves as the Vice President of Transportation and Infrastructure at the U.S. Chamber of Commerce and oversees the development and implementation of the Chamber's transportation infrastructure policy and represents the U.S. Chamber of Commerce on Capitol Hill, as well as before the administration and industry organizations. He also leads the Americans for Transportation Mobility Coalition, and he comes to the Chamber from AECOM, an engineering and construction company where he served as the Director of Government Relations and has done many other things with them. He's got a full bio that you can find on the U.S. Chamber's website, but without further ado, because Ed, when it comes to transportation and infrastructure, you are my business expert on the ground that we go to and come and meet with in Washington, D.C. Like I said, when we're up there, we come to D.C. 3 times a year. And so we're ready, first of all, for everything to open up so that we can come back to your offices. But thank you so much for joining us virtually. And everyone, I introduce to you Ed Mortimer, the Vice President of Transportation and Infrastructure with the U.S. Chamber. Ed, take it over.
Great. Thanks, Lisa. And I hope everyone's doing well. And I'm glad to hear that Bossier missed the worst of this storm. I know your community has suffered through many. And although I learned something from Monique, who you probably all know works with us, there's the dirty side and the clean side. So I guess you guys were on the clean side this time. So yeah, I'm just glad that your community is okay and everyone's safe. Unfortunately, not every part of the state fared as well. But again, appreciate the introduction and glad to be with you all. I've had the pleasure to talk with many of you. Lisa, you're right. We've had a great relationship with you and your team coming to Washington, and you all know, and you've been a great partner with the U.S. Chamber in talking about the need to modernize our infrastructure. This most recent natural disaster shows that, we need to have a 21st century infrastructure, and some of the things that we're dealing with are very different than when we built the interstate highways in the 50s and 60s. We developed inland waterways 100 years ago. And so we believe there's a lot of private sector innovation and technology that can come to this debate to kind of harden our infrastructure. Look at the great success story of the levees in New Orleans. They held. That was, an architectural and engineering feat, but investment was required to do that. And so we have been working very hard to get the federal government to have that next vision for infrastructure. Like I said, we had President Eisenhower at the interstate highway system. We had Teddy Roosevelt developed the inland waterways. And so we feel like as we're getting through a pandemic, as we're trying to get our economy reopened, there is nothing that can provide long-term economic growth than modernizing infrastructure. Your community knows this well. You're in a tri-state region. It's not just about the state, it's about a global economy that we're all in. And unfortunately, the United States, which was the leader in infrastructure, we are continuing to drop every year. The most recent World Bank ratings of our infrastructure is we're 13th, even though we have by far the largest economy. China is spending triple the amount of money on infrastructure as we are. And so, you know, our view at the US Chamber has been, we need to modernize the infrastructure. Businesses of all sizes, both large and small, look at infrastructure as kind of the circulatory system of our economy. It keeps us moving. It provides a quality of life for all citizens. And it's not all on the federal government. It's a shared responsibility between federal, state, local, but it's the federal government that hasn't done its part. I know you all have been very active in the State House. Louisiana hasn't quite made the big investment, but it's been, you've seen increased investments from the state over the last several years. We believe that if we can enact an infrastructure bill this year at the federal level, that will help break the logjam in Baton Rouge and provide the state has to match these federal dollars. And therefore we can really see some, you know, variety of sources to help modernize the infrastructure. Because again, no matter how big the infrastructure investment bill is, it's not going to be enough. So we have to pick priorities. We have to make sure that our states, our regions are connected, both rural and urban. And so our belief is that getting this federal action is going to be really critical. So let me take a step back and let you know what's been going on at the federal government, let you know a little bit about the bill, and then kind of we need your help, particularly with your House members. So as I mentioned, we've been talking about infrastructure for a long time. We worked very closely with the previous administration on infrastructure. We didn't quite get there. This new administration has come in, and again, working with the Congress on a bipartisan basis, we've continued to work and work. We finally broke the logjam in the United States Senate. And I will say Senator Cassidy has been one of the leaders of breaking the logjam in the Senate. He brought together a bipartisan group of 20 senators that created what is called the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, which is a $1 trillion investment over 10 years to modernize our infrastructure. And let me define infrastructure, because that definition has gotten a little loose. Our view from the business community perspective on infrastructure is our physical assets. So our transportation networks, our water systems, both stormwater, wastewater. I mentioned all of our transportation. So that's the ports, the inland waterways, airports, our roads and bridges, transit. Also energy. Energy needs to be a key component of this bill. And then rural broadband. We want to make sure, and I think if we didn't know it before the pandemic, we certainly realize it now, that every American needs access to the internet for 21st century, to have a 21st century job. And again, we believe there's public-private partnership solutions to make sure that every American has that. And so Senator Cassidy and 19 of his colleagues put together this bill, which is providing $550 billion in new investment, added with some previous investments, leads to the $1 trillion bill. Again, making a major investments in not just our transportation, water, energy, broadband. These are all the backbone parts of what businesses need to be successful. And again, it's a federal responsibility. The Constitution calls for the federal government to do two things. They may have wandered a bit beyond those two things, but the two things the Constitution calls for is national defense and interstate commerce. And so the federal role in infrastructure is well and long had. And so this bill that came together with the 20 senators came up in the United States Senate last month. And in spite of all the rhetoric and the partisanship that we see, this bill got 69 votes, which was 40% of Senate Republicans voted yes. We didn't get Senator Kennedy, but obviously Senator Cassidy was a real leader in this area. So again, 69-30. I can tell you they don't vote 69-30 on the day of the week. So again, showing that strong bipartisan support to modernize our infrastructure. And again, as I started off by these remarks, this is a core responsibility of government. And why is bipartisanship so important? We at the U.S. Chamber don't say it just to be Pollyannish. We know that these are difficult times politically, and folks have different points of view. But the reality is an issue like infrastructure is there is an old saying, there is no Republican road, there is no Democrat bridge. These are American projects for American people, and American jobs are the ones that build them. This is a core responsibility of government, and we have neglected this area for far too long. So again, getting that substantial vote in the United States Senate, including the Republican leader of the Senate, Mitch McConnell, and 18 of his colleagues, got that through. Now we move over to the House of Representatives, where some of the Democratic leadership has tried to tie the physical infrastructure bill that is a bipartisan bill with what they're calling care economy, which they're using a procedural mechanism called reconciliation, which is very inside the beltway. And believe me, it puts me to sleep too. But the reality is the care economy bill is going to be passed on just a party line basis. So only Democrats are supporting that bill. We at the U.S. Chamber have worked to separate the two because we are very opposed to the care economy bill, not because there's some good things in there, childcare, education, pre-K education. Our view is if they're good enough, they should be able to be done like infrastructure was done in a bipartisan basis. Our big concern with this reconciliation package or care economy package is that to pay for it, business taxes are going to go up. And again, business taxes going up at a time when our economy is still struggling to recover from the pandemic. And then actually we have these natural disasters. In our view, this is not the time to raise business taxes. And let me take a step back by saying the bipartisan infrastructure bill does not raise the corporate rate, does not raise capital gains. And so our view is that the bipartisan infrastructure bill is paid for in a way that does not hurt the business community, but actually is going to provide many benefits to us, where the care economy bill would have a very negative impact on economic growth. So we worked very hard as the House was taking up, they call it a rule to decide how these bills are going to come up. We worked with a group of 10 moderate Democrats and were able to secure a rule that the House passed that said the physical bipartisan infrastructure bill is going to be separate from reconciliation. And we're going to set a date of September 27th for a House vote on that bill. So that the House will vote on final passage. They will pick up the Senate bill, not amend it, pick it up, and hopefully with all of our support, pass it. That bill will then go to the president's desk and signed into law. Why is that date of September 27th important? One, a date certain, so we know when the vote's coming. Number two, our federal highway and transit programs expire on September 30th. And so we need a federal action to make sure that we don't have any disruption in these programs. And so getting this bill to the president's desk by September 30th is really key to ensuring that we make the investments necessary. We don't see any disruption in these critical programs, and we get the job done. So again, this bill is the most substantial infrastructure bill we've had in American history. It's bipartisan. It's paid for in a way that I'll be the first to admit not perfect. But again, talk to anyone who's worked in legislation. There is no perfect legislation. But again, this is the least negative impact to the business community with the greatest benefits to all of our members with economic growth. And again, these are going to build infrastructure assets that all of us as Americans benefit for 50 to 100 years to come. So the question is not if we do this, what happens if we don't do this? If we don't do this, we're going to continue to see lost productivity. We're going to continue to see a decrease in quality of life. And again, this is kicking the can down the road. So what we're asking today is for you to talk to your House delegation, urge a yes vote when the House takes this up. Now, look, there are a lot of Republicans right now who are nervous about this bill because they don't want it to be tied to the reconciliation bill. But that's not an excuse. The way the House voted separates the two. And so there's no reason you can't vote yes on the bipartisan infrastructure bill and vote no on reconciliation. And so, again, this is a really critical moment for our country. This is something we've been working at with you and many others around the country for many years. We're at the goal line, folks. This is it. So we need the final push to get the vote in the House. We need 218 votes and then get that bill to the president's desk so we can start putting all the ideas into projects that we can all benefit from. So again, this is a critical moment in our nation's history. This is a top issue for the U.S. Chamber. You've all been a great partner with us in this endeavor. I know it's not going to be easy. Don't take no for an answer. There's going to be a lot of reasons. People are going to say, well, you know, it's not really paid for. I can tell you the lead senator on this bill is Rob Portman. You might remember that name because he worked in the Bush administration as the head of the budget office at the White House. It is paid for. Again, we all know in the business community, the long-term benefits and the tax revenue that'll be created because of the investments in these infrastructures. And so this is our moment. We believe now's the time to act. And again, we urge you to talk to your House members, urge them to vote yes on September 27th. And let's get going on implementing this critical legislation that will truly benefit your community. You all have such a diverse infrastructure portfolio. You have airports, you have waterways, the port. This is the moment that if we can get this bill signed into law, we can really start putting people to work. We can start seeing increased productivity, and we can have the long-term economic growth that I think every business in America is looking for. So I will stop there. Really appreciate this opportunity to be with you. And Lisa, glad to take any questions that folks have.
Thanks, Ed, and thank you for that overview. I do want to remind our participants or tell you, since I neglected to in the beginning, that if you have any questions, if you'll put those in the chat box, Jessica Hemingway is our producer of this, and she's going to assist me with the questions. And if you have any questions on if you're watching on Facebook Live, submit those. Ed, for the folks that are watching or will be watching a little bit later, and you've stated the case of the need now, but how can you explain to us, as a reminder, very quickly, how did we get into this situation of such poor infrastructure? The bridges are so poor, the lack of maintenance. How did we even get into this situation to begin with, to have this critical need today?
Great question, Lisa. Basically, and I think any of you who own a home can relate to this. We built infrastructure that was the envy of the world, and then we didn't maintain it properly. We also didn't understand that, you know, we built our interstate highway system. Anyone who studied Eisenhower, it was actually built for the military originally. It wasn't built for the economy. It was built to move tanks around the country. Obviously, we're not going to be moving tanks around the country anytime soon. We're in an e-commerce environment. We have a diversified portfolio of energy sources. We have, you know, new industries, biotech, distribution centers, very different than when we originally built a lot of these infrastructure assets. So we need to get beyond just band-aiding old infrastructure, and we need to think anew. And so what happened is we just neglected it, and it's kind of fallen apart. And state DOTs have been band-aiding it. I think you have a good DOT secretary in Sean Wilson, who I've gotten to know, and he's had his hands full. But we cannot neglect this issue anymore. And there are bridges in your state. You know, President went down to Lake Charles. I've been to the Baton Rouge Bridge. Folks, it's embarrassing. It's like we're a third world country, and we're the United States of America. We can do better. And so this bill isn't going to solve all of those problems, but it's going to put us in the right path to deliver the type of projects and allow the private sector to bring in the innovation and technology necessary to build 21st century infrastructure.
Thank you for that. And we are getting some questions in the chat box, and we're going to get to those. I have one more question for the group at large based upon your comments specifically. And that was, you've said, and we understand that this is paid for. The bipartisan bill is not going to hurt the business community, but I still would like to know exactly, specifically, how will this be paid for? Because you know, you and I, we work in this realm every day. We know that budgets are extremely tight at a federal, state, and local level. So how are we going to pay for this without passing that on?
Sure, great question. And you know, look, it's a variety. There's no one pay for in this bill. Okay. It's about 12 different ways to pay for it. And that's one of the things we learned really quick, is there's no one solution here. Now, I will say we at the U.S. Chamber had thought for roads, bridges, and transit, there's a fuel tax. It hasn't been adjusted since 1993. We had always supported paying that because our view is that the folks that use the system should pay for it. The Biden administration said no new taxes on anyone under $400,000. And so that took user fees off the table. So they've come together with a variety of user fees that they don't call gas tax, so it's something different. There's also ways that we're leveraging current spending to pay more. And again, I think they're also taking into effect that we know when you build an infrastructure asset, you look at the development around there. And so the tax revenue that'll be created due to the development of these infrastructures. The Congressional Budget Office that normally scores these bills did not say that this bill paid for every dollar. But again, if you look at the dynamic scoring, again, we at the U.S. Chamber looked at when we supported the tax reform bill in 2017, we call it dynamic scoring. We know that when you keep money in businesses' pockets, they're going to spend it in research and development and developing their businesses, and that's going to create new sources of revenue. We view the same way that's going to happen here with this infrastructure bill. So again, you know, I can go through all this, but it is paid for. This will not add to the deficit. And really the question is, if we didn't do this, we would actually, we're going to fix the infrastructure one way or the other. The longer we wait, the costs are only going up. And we continue to fall behind to China. And our view is we got to turn that around, and this bill will turn it around.
So we have a question here, again, a couple of questions. Do you know how much of will go towards our electrical grid that's in this infrastructure bill?
So there's not a line item just for the electrical grid, but there's going to be some pots of money that they can utilize it for hardening of the grid. Obviously we recognize that that is a critical issue. We saw what your state's been dealing with. We saw what happened in Texas. I believe it's going to be several $billions, but there's not a line item. There's some flexibility for state and local governments to decide. Some communities need to spend more on hardening than others. So there's some flexibility there for local decision making to decide how those dollars should be used. So my suggestion for your community is put together a list of the most critical assets and then work with your state government to make sure they understand what are your priorities, which are the projects that really are the game changers that can make a difference to your community, and make sure those get the proper funding levels.
Okay, and thank you for that. And I'm thinking about all the many parts that are in the bill. So my mind is just, because I'm thinking broadband and and hard infrastructure and all of those kinds of things. So there's another question here that shows the multi layers of it. Is what percentage of these funds will be devoted to developing and maintaining clean, renewable energy infrastructures?
So again, that is an important part of the legislation, that we recognize that a diversity of energy portfolio, particularly as we're trying to improve climate. Again, there are pots of money for state and local communities to access that. Just to give you some examples, electric charging stations. There's a line item in there. I think it's $125 billion for electric charging stations. There's other pots of money that communities could use to support other renewable energy sources. But, again, we recognize that a diversity of energy portfolios that help us address climate is a key part of the bill. And we're proud of that. We think that's a good opportunity for the private sector to work with the government officials who are going to implement this bill to make some really important assets so we can have that diverse energy sources moving forward.
So you talked about the two, there's a bipartisan bill and the care economy bill. And the bipartisan bill is the good one. The care economy is the one that puts the burden on the business community. Mm-hmm. Has the U.S. Chamber put out a white paper that shows the differences in those two that can be shared and give us a better understanding of how the bipartisan bill is not going to hurt the business community, and it would then give the business community stronger favor in supporting all of this and saying this is a good thing?
Yes, Lisa, I'm glad you mentioned that. So we can send you, we have a summary of the bipartisan infrastructure bill. We also have a report that was done. The Chamber just hired a gentleman named Thomas Wickham, who is the House parliamentarian. So he is the kind of the rule keeper in the House. And he wrote a memo explaining the separation between the physical bipartisan infrastructure bill and the care economy reconciliation bill. And so we will share that with you all. And please share that with your membership because there are very substantial differences. And it's okay to vote yes on the bipartisan infrastructure and a vote no on the care economy bill. But we will share that with you all.
Okay, great. Thank you. Are there any other questions out there? There's quite a few, and he's hit those. Jessica, do you see anything else? Let me go back into my chat room here. So there is a lot of confusion with it, and so our vote, the vote that we're waiting for, is on September 27th.
That is correct. It's going to be a September 27th vote in the House of Representatives. The Senate has already passed it by 69-30, so a strong bipartisan vote. We're now looking for the House to take it up. And again, the way the rule was set, it's not going to be changed. It's the bill. It's the bipartisan infrastructure bill. It's going to be a yes or no vote. And we are encouraging you all to talk to your lawmakers and urge a yes vote.
For us to better understand the CARES economy bill that you said would put a burden on small businesses, can you talk specifically to that and how that burden would be coming down if there was a yes vote on that and it were to pass?
Sure. So this CARE economy bill is still being put together. So we don't have all the details of it yet, but we do know that the House and Senate passed what they call a resolution that would be a $3.5 trillion bill. And so then it goes, so right now it's going to the committees and they're supposed to put the details together. But what we've seen is that they're looking to do things. And again, as I mentioned earlier, a lot of these things, I think the business community would be willing to support some of these, pre-K, childcare. The problem is that the pay-fors are all socked to the business community, looking at raising corporate taxes, looking at raising, estate taxes, taxes on C corps. And in our view, that is the wrong way to go about it. There are some bipartisan solutions in our view that we could address these issues, but the way the Democrats are going at this bill by themselves, it's total opposite of what we're getting done here on infrastructure. It's not the way government's supposed to work. They're supposed to compromise. They're supposed to come together and address these issues in a way that are durable and long lasting. And when one party passes something down, it's not going to last. And so that is not good governing. And so, that's why we would like to be able to support some of the things in this bill, this care economy bill, but this is the wrong time, the wrong mechanism. And we think the contrast between that and the bipartisan infrastructure bill is bipartisan infrastructure bill is how government's supposed to work. The reconciliation care economy bill is government that is not working.
Thank you. And we're all fearful, and I know that we understand that we're saying the bipartisan bill is not going to put a burden on our business community. Obviously, the U.S. Chamber wouldn't support it if it did, because you are a business organization, but yet we continue to be told that it is going to create new debt at a federal level. And it always seems that flows downward one way or another. So can you speak to that? Is this going to create trillions of dollars in new debt and spending on the economy? And is that related to what you're saying, that if we build this and maintain it, then the businesses are going to come and we're going to see those tax dollars to help offset all of that?
Right. So look, I mean, this is paid for. It's been judged to be paid for. But look, there are some people who don't want to support anything that helps the current administration. We in the business community, we have to work with whoever is in charge. We worked with the previous administration on infrastructure. We were hopeful to get it done then. There are a variety of reasons we didn't quite get there. But here's an opportunity to get something done. It's been a core issue of the business community 10 plus years. Let's not make the perfect be the enemy of the good here. Just because we may not like some of the people in certain spots, and it's all about who gets credit. The bottom line is this is a core responsibility of government to invest in our infrastructure, to provide economic growth so companies that are your members can benefit from. And it doesn't matter who's in the seats. It's about getting the job done and addressing an issue to important to the American people. So again, there are people that will say that this adds $1 trillion to the deficit. They have no proof behind it, but you can say anything you want in this world, as we know. We certainly have the facts behind that this is paid for. And again, if you look at the Republicans who are standing up for this bill, the Republican leader in the Senate, Senator Portman, Senator Cassidy, who you all know very well, these are not folks who want to add to the deficit. They would not have supported the bill if they thought this bill was going to add to the deficit. So again, look at who we're talking about who's supporting this. The U.S. Chamber does not want to support raising deficits. Our members' businesses don't operate in deficits very well. So again, these are assets that we benefit from for many years to come. We're going to get the revenue and then some. And my final point is, not doing this is not the answer. If we just don't do it, what happens? What happens is we don't address all these critical bridge projects, the water projects. We're going to continue to fall behind to China and other countries. That's not a good outcome for any of us. And so let's just get this done.
Well, I think you've wrapped that up pretty nicely. And I'd say I'm sorry, not sorry for some of the really hard questions, but folks are confused out there, and they're hearing information from all sides. And the more information that we can put out there for them to be able to make their decisions and educated decisions, I think is the best. And that's what's best for this country and our state and our communities. And so, Ed, I really, really appreciate you being completely forthcoming with us. And, sometimes we just have to kind of tell it like it is.
Absolutely. And, there's good natured people on both sides. But again, look at the facts. You all know what infrastructure means to your businesses, to your community. There's strong bipartisan support for this. Let's just get the job done. Let's start building.
And maintenance, and to your point of how did we get here, maintenance is absolutely critical. And in our region specifically, we are seeing those issues of maintenance. And you had mentioned that the state has come and filled in for some of those maintenance projects to help with the federal level. But I can tell you that at our parish county level, they have stepped up to the plate to fill the gap at a state or a federal level. So it does take all of us together. The other part that we're really interested in and excited about, as long as all the cost factors play out the way that they're supposed to, bills are always fluid, is the broadband part of that, because that is a piece of infrastructure that 20 years ago was not something that we were talking about, but we have to have that as well, and that is a piece of this bill as well.
Absolutely. I think there's $65 billion for broadband. And, you're right, Lisa, we didn't think of that as physical infrastructure, but I think any of us who struggled through the pandemic and recognize that it is a critical component. Now, we can't all stream Netflix all day, but again, if you're going to have a job in the 21st century, you can't just have broadband when your kid goes to school. You need it everywhere that you're at. And we know the private sector wants to help build that out. And hopefully this bill will speed that process up so we can get the job done and get everybody connected.
Thank you. Well, you know what? Again, Ed, I just thank you for your time today, and looking forward to coming back to DC. Hasn't quite completely opened up yet. We are planning a trip in October, but it looks like it might be another virtual trip. So I'll be seeing you online again to talk to our business leaders that typically make that trip up to Washington, D.C. But I do want to say again, thank you to our sponsor for today's Chamber Chat, Barksdale Federal Credit Union. And thank you to those that are participating with us on the Zoom and those that have joined us on Facebook Live. And Ed, just keep sending that information downline, and we will continue to share that information. So thank you very much for your time today.
Great to be with you all, and look forward to coming down to see you. I want to come down there and see some of these projects when we get this bill done. So
yes, we had talked about that, but yes, I'm ready for the new normal of whatever that means past pandemic, of when we can all feel comfortable getting face to face again, and really not have to wear a mask.
right.
So, but yes, we will have you down, Ed, as soon as you're able to get out and about. So thank you again for joining us virtually on today's Chamber Chat, and I'll be talking to you soon.